ladies and gentlemen. Have you ever met someone whose words felt like poison wrapped in charm? Now imagine this, you're standing at a crossroads in life and the man in front of you speaks not just casually, but with precision, with an intent that quietly chips away at your worth. At first it sounds normal, maybe even flattering, but listen closely, because these 5 things he says aren't harmless, they're red flags drenched in manipulation. And if you don't walk away now, you won't just lose time, you'll lose yourself. It's terrifying how easy it is to ignore the signs when you're craving connection or clarity. But what if I told you that everything you're trying to build, your peace, your future, your self-respect, could be dismantled by entertaining just one of these sentences? Ever laugh at a bad joke just to keep the peace? Yeah, that's how it starts. But don't worry, by the end of this, you won't just recognize these phrases, you'll feel the urgency to run from them like your life depends on it, because it just might. Words that manipulate are weapons in disguise. They don't come at you with fists or fury. They come softly, carefully chosen, sometimes even lovingly spoken, but their impact cuts just as deep as any blade. When a man speaks with the intent to control, to distort your sense of reality, or to reshape how you view yourself, it often doesn't feel dangerous at first. In fact, it often feels comforting. It might even sound like concern, like he's trying to help, like he knows better. But behind that softness hides an agenda, one that has nothing to do with your growth and everything to do with his dominance. Manipulative words don't scream, they whisper. They say things like, "You're too sensitive," or "No one else would understand you the way I do." These aren't just statements, they're psychological tools. Each one chips away at your certainty, your independence, your inner compass. They make you second-guess your memory, your instincts, even your emotions. Slowly, you begin to rely more on him for reality than on yourself. That's not love, that's control. It's not just about what's said, it's also about what's left unsaid. Manipulators are masters of omission. They know how to say just enough to keep you closed, but never enough to give you clarity. They leave you in limbo, a state of emotional confusion where you're constantly seeking answers, trying to prove your worth, hoping for approval. They pull away just enough to make you chase them, then return with just enough affection to make you stay. This cycle isn't random. It's calculated. It's designed to make you addicted to their validation. Think about how subtle manipulation can be. Imagine a man who constantly compares you to others just slightly. She's really focused on her career, unlike most people. It doesn't sound harmful, right? But if that statement makes you feel inadequate, less than, suddenly unsure of your own path, that's not just an observation. That's a seed planted with precision, meant to grow into doubt. Over time, those seeds bloom into insecurity, dependency, and silence. You stop challenging him, stop expressing your needs, stop being fully you. And that's exactly where he wants you. Manipulative words aren't always lies, sometimes they're partial truths. Half facts wrapped in emotional leverage. A man might say, "I'm only doing this because I care." That sounds noble, doesn't it? But if that care limits your freedom, silences your voice, or guilts you into obedience, it's not care, it's coercion. This is how manipulation works. It dresses up control in the language of love. It uses emotion as currency, not connection. And then there's humor, the most overlooked weapon of manipulation. When a man disguises cruelty in jokes, especially ones aimed at your intelligence, your appearance, your worth, and then says, "Relax, it was just a joke," he's not being funny. He's testing your boundaries, seeing what you'll tolerate, seeing how far he can go, and each time you laugh it off to avoid conflict, he learns that your peace is negotiable. That's not harmless. That's groundwork for emotional erosion. You may have felt the discomfort before, but brushed it off. You may have thought you were overreacting, being too emotional, too difficult. That's the brilliance of manipulation. It makes you question yourself, not him. You end up managing his emotions, his reactions, his expectations, while abandoning your own. You think you're keeping the peace, but really you're being trained to accept less. Less love, less respect, less truth. Pay attention to patterns, not apologies. Words of remorse mean nothing without change. A man who says hurtful things and follows them with flowers or affection is not remorseful, he's strategic. He knows just how much pain you'll take as long as he sprinkles in hope, and hope is powerful. Hope keeps people in toxic cycles for years. But hope without evidence becomes denial, and denial is the graveyard of self-worth. There's a reason manipulation is so effective. It thrives in environments where people seek love, connection, and approval. The manipulator sees your desire to be understood and weaponizes it. He doesn't need to raise his voice, he just needs to raise your doubt. And once that seed is planted, you'll start doing the work for him, questioning your value, silencing your instincts, justifying his behavior. The real danger is not in the obvious attacks, it's in the slow unraveling of your identity. The more you excuse manipulation, the more you normalize it. The more you explain away his words, the more you betray your inner truth. And the longer you stay, the harder it becomes to hear your own voice beneath his. Because somewhere along the way, your survival turns into silence, and your silence becomes a cage. Charm without respect is a trap. It feels magnetic at first. His words make you smile, his compliments light up your day, and his presence feels intoxicating. He knows exactly what to say, when to say it, and how to deliver it with just the right tone to make you feel seen, chosen, special. But underneath that surface-level glow, something vital is missing: respect. And without that, no matter how charming he appears, you are walking into a carefully disguised snare. Charm is the easy part. It's performative, almost rehearsed. It's the polished front of someone who's mastered the art of making people feel good temporarily. But respect is different. Respect is rooted in how he treats you when you're not shining, when you're not doing what he wants, when you set a boundary, when you're vulnerable, when you speak your truth. A man who truly respects you won't just flatter you when it benefits him. He'll honor your space, your choices, your individuality, even when it costs him something. If he's only kind when you're pleasing him, that's not affection, that's convenience. When charm is weaponized without the foundation of respect, it becomes manipulation in disguise. It confuses your intuition. You start associating warmth with safety, assuming someone who makes you laugh or feel desired must have your best interests at heart. But then come the subtle dismissals. He interrupts you mid-sentence, jokes at your expense in front of others, ignores your discomfort when it doesn't serve his mood. And because he follows it with a smile, a sweet message, or a night out, you convince yourself it's not a big deal. You begin to doubt your instincts, assuming you're being too sensitive. That's exactly how the trap tightens. Respect isn't always loud. It's in the pauses, the moments when a man chooses to listen rather than deflect, when he acknowledges your boundaries rather than test them. It's when he values your no as much as your yes. Charm, on the other hand, is loud and intoxicating. It floods your brain with dopamine and blinds you to the early signs of disrespect. You might feel excited, even lucky, but beneath that excitement is often a quiet, gnawing feeling that something isn't quite right. You notice inconsistencies between his words and his actions. He tells you you're amazing but criticizes your goals. He says he cares but disappears when you need him most. That contradiction is the red flag hiding behind the charisma. Too often people stay in these dynamics because they mistake charm for character. But character is how he treats you when you're no longer impressed. It's what he does when you're not easy to love that tells the truth. Respect means consistency. It means you don't have to perform to be valued. It means your boundaries aren't negotiations, they're honored without question. But when a man lacks that, his charm becomes a mask. And masks eventually slip. You may find yourself defending him to your friends. He didn't mean it that way. He's just under a lot of stress. He's actually really sweet, you just don't see that side of him. You rationalize his behavior because his charm makes it difficult to believe he could be hurting you intentionally. But the longer you stay, the more you'll realize that charm without respect always asks you to shrink your needs, your voice, your independence. You begin to adjust yourself to avoid his moods. You downplay your success so he doesn't feel threatened. You laugh at things that hurt just to keep the peace. And eventually you become a stranger to yourself. The scariest part is how normalized this becomes. How quickly you start accepting crumbs of affection, thinking they're meals. How easily you begin to crave the moments when he's sweet, even if they come less and less frequently. That unpredictability is the bait. You wait for the version of him that made you feel special in the beginning, not realizing that version was only ever a lure. Without respect, charm is just emotional currency used to buy your silence, your forgiveness, your loyalty. You don't owe loyalty to someone who only shows up for the version of you that benefits him. True connection doesn't require you to earn kindness. If you constantly feel like you're being tested, graded, or subtly undermined, it's not love, it's control disguised as charisma. Don't let his charm blind you to the slow erosion of your worth. Pay attention to the way you feel after the charm fades. Do you feel safe, heard, supported? Or do you feel confused, unsteady, and unsure of your value? A man can look you in the eyes, say all the right things, and still lack the one thing that makes a relationship sustainable: the ability to honor your humanity even when it's inconvenient for him. Without respect, charm becomes a leash, not a bond. And the longer you ignore that truth, the harder it becomes to leave the trap you didn't realize you were walking into. Gaslighting begins with subtle suggestions. It doesn't start with shouting accusations or obvious lies. It begins quietly, like a breeze that shifts direction without you noticing, slowly redirecting the course of your thoughts. It often comes wrapped in concern, coated in care, disguised as something helpful. A man might say, "Are you sure that's how it happened?" Or, "You always get worked up over the smallest things." These phrases seem innocent on the surface, even reasonable, but their impact is anything but. Each one is a carefully placed seed of doubt, planted to make you question not just your memory or emotions, but your very reality. At first, you might not even catch it. You may laugh it off or brush past it. After all, you trust him or you want to. You assume he's trying to help you gain perspective. And that's exactly what makes gaslighting so dangerous. It thrives on your willingness to give someone the benefit of the doubt. He doesn't have to tell you you're crazy. He just needs to imply it often enough that you start wondering if maybe he's right, if maybe you're too emotional, too sensitive, too forgetful. Over time, your confidence erodes not through insults, but through slow, repeated erosion of your sense of self. Gaslighting isn't always direct. Sometimes it's about what's omitted. He forgets things you clearly remember, denies conversations that shook you, minimizes events that left you unsettled. And when you try to talk about it, he shifts the focus. You always want to argue. "Why are you so dramatic?" Suddenly, you're defending your feelings rather than discussing his behavior. You begin to second-guess yourself, unsure whether your reaction is valid, whether your memory is reliable. That's not conflict resolution. That's psychological warfare. The power of gaslighting lies in its subtlety. It doesn't need to be constant to be effective. A few well-placed comments over time are enough to cause damage. And the more emotionally invested you are in the relationship, the more vulnerable you become. Love becomes the hook. You don't want to believe someone you care about could deliberately try to manipulate you. So instead, you assume the problem is you. You change how you express yourself. You stop bringing up concerns. You suppress your instincts. And with every adjustment you make to avoid friction, you shrink a little more. Gaslighting feeds on your need for clarity. When things don't add up, when words don't match actions, you seek understanding. But instead of answers, you're met with confusion. He may tell you one thing today and the opposite tomorrow. He may promise change but repeat the same behavior. And when you point it out, he flips the script. You're just being negative. You're imagining things. The inconsistency isn't a flaw in his communication, it's the method. Confusion keeps you off balance. It keeps you explaining, apologizing, and ultimately complying. Think about how often this happens in subtle, everyday moments. You say something bothered you, and he responds, "I was just joking. You need to lighten up." You express a boundary, and he says, "You're overreacting again." These aren't random reactions. They're tools meant to minimize your emotional experience and elevate his control. And over time, those tools become patterns. Patterns that train you to stay quiet, to doubt your gut, to seek his approval before trusting your own mind. Gaslighting doesn't just make you question events, it makes you question your entire perception of yourself. You begin to wonder if you're too difficult to love, too reactive to be taken seriously, too unstable to trust your judgment. And when someone you care about constantly reflects those doubts back to you, it becomes nearly impossible to separate their voice from your inner voice. That confusion becomes a trap, locking you into cycles of self-doubt and emotional dependence. You might find yourself constantly replaying conversations in your head, asking others for reassurance, writing down what was said just to prove it happened. These are not the behaviors of someone who is overly sensitive. They are the survival mechanisms of someone trying to hold on to reality in the face of constant distortion. When you're gaslit long enough, you learn to live in a state of quiet urgency, always questioning, always anxious, always afraid that the problem is you. The most dangerous part of gaslighting is that it often works best when there's still affection involved. He may hurt you emotionally, but still hold your hand, still tell you he loves you, still make you feel seen in moments that seem real. And it's those moments that keep you stuck, the glimpses of warmth in between the cold denial. You keep chasing clarity, hoping he'll finally understand, finally admit, finally validate your truth. But validation is not the goal of gaslighting, control is. Once you're caught in that loop, your reality becomes fragile. You stop trusting your emotions. You suppress your truth. And even when you suspect something is wrong, you find yourself wondering if it's all in your head. That's how gaslighting wins, not with force, but with doubt. Not by telling you you're wrong, but by making you believe you can't be right. Silence in the face of disrespect is self-betrayal. When someone disrespects you, whether through words, actions, or omissions, silence may seem like the easier path. You might choose to stay quiet to avoid conflict, to maintain peace, or because you don't want to make a scene. But what you don't realize in those moments is that by not speaking up, by not defending your worth, you are betraying yourself in the most fundamental way. Silence is not neutrality, it is an acceptance, a submission, a quiet agreement to allow someone else's treatment of you to define your value. It is the act of relinquishing control over your own boundaries and letting someone else dictate the terms of your dignity. We are conditioned to believe that confrontation is dangerous, that it will lead to drama, to heightened emotions, to a breakdown in relationships. So we often internalize this belief and decide that silence is the safer option. But in reality, every time we choose silence in the face of disrespect, we are reinforcing the belief that we are powerless in those situations, that we don't have the right to be heard, and that our feelings are not worth standing up for. The truth is, silence only strengthens the power dynamic that enables disrespect to thrive. It's not about being confrontational or aggressive. It's about having the courage to speak your truth, to assert your boundaries, and to make it clear that you will not accept behavior that undermines your worth. When someone speaks to you with disregard, dismisses your opinions, or belittles you, that moment is an opportunity for you to stand in your power. If you choose silence, you are telling yourself that your voice doesn't matter, that your emotions don't deserve validation, that you are somehow less than the person disrespecting you. Over time, this silence chips away at your self-esteem, making you feel smaller, weaker, and less deserving of respect. We often think that silence will preserve the peace, but it does the opposite. When you don't speak up, you allow the cycle of disrespect to continue, sometimes escalating it further. The person who disrespects you might think they can get away with it, that you're either too passive to care or too afraid to stand up for yourself. But each time you remain silent, that behavior becomes reinforced and the pattern of disrespect deepens. The longer you stay silent, the harder it becomes to break the cycle because you've already conditioned yourself to accept it. You might convince yourself that it's just not worth rocking the boat or that it's easier to ignore it. But the truth is, every time you stay silent, you are feeding the very thing that makes you feel less than. What's even more damaging is how silence can cause a rift within yourself. When you remain silent in the face of disrespect, you are not just allowing the other person to treat you poorly, you are also betraying your own values. You are ignoring the inner voice that says, "This is not right," or "I deserve better." You are suppressing your own needs, desires, and emotions in order to keep the peace or avoid confrontation, and in doing so, you start to feel disconnected from who you truly are. This internal conflict leads to frustration, resentment, and self-doubt. You begin to wonder why you didn't speak up, why you didn't stand your ground, and whether you're weak or not worthy of being treated with dignity. That sense of betrayal is like a slow burn, eating away at your sense of self until you lose sight of the person you once were. True strength is not measured by the ability to stay silent in the face of disrespect, but by the courage to speak up and defend your worth. It's about owning your truth, setting boundaries, and showing up for yourself even when it's uncomfortable. Silence in the face of disrespect may feel like a way to protect yourself in the moment, but in the long run, it is a disservice to your well-being. It teaches others that they can treat you however they want without facing any consequences. More importantly, it teaches you that you don't deserve respect, that your feelings don't matter, and that you should expect to be treated poorly. Betraying yourself in this way can manifest in many forms. It might be the colleague who consistently belittles your ideas during meetings, and you stay quiet because you don't want to seem confrontational. It might be the partner who takes you for granted, forgetting your needs and treating you like an afterthought, and you remain silent because you don't want to create tension. It might be the friend who constantly takes advantage of your kindness, and you keep quiet because you fear upsetting the relationship. In each of these scenarios, your silence becomes a form of self-betrayal, a message to yourself that you don't deserve better, that your feelings are secondary, and that it's okay to let others treat you however they wish. Breaking the pattern of silence starts with acknowledging your worth and the importance of your voice. It means understanding that you have the right to stand up for yourself, to speak out when you're being mistreated, and to protect your emotional space. Speaking up doesn't have to be dramatic or aggressive. It can be as simple as saying, "I don't appreciate that," or "That's not how I expect to be treated." It's about reclaiming your power, about showing yourself the respect you deserve. When you speak your truth, you send a message not just to others, but to yourself that you are worthy of being heard, that your feelings matter, and that you will no longer allow disrespect to define your relationships or your sense of self.